Oh, he called me sweetheart in front of the board. That was the first mistake. Not the biggest one, not by a long shot. But that's when I knew I'd let this go on too long. Knew he thought I was harmless. That smug little pat on the back, like I was his intern fetching coffee, not the woman who'd cracked the compression bottleneck that stalled his entire pipeline last quarter. But I smiled, sweetly, just like he wanted, because I needed him to believe I was still playing the part. So when he clicked to slide 32 of my white paper, rebranded Dalton's dynamic reduction model, I didn't storm the stage. Didn't call him out. I didn't even blink when he said, "We're in early talks with DARPA." Instead, I sat in the back row, counting seconds. Not because I was afraid, no, because I was timing it. You see, there's something deeply satisfying about precision, about watching a trap you built from the inside detonate at the exact nanosecond you intended. At 11:07 a.m., a single notification appeared on Dalton's phone mid-presentation. He glanced down, then fumbled his words. At 11:08, one of the interns, Haley, bless her chaos, leaned over to whisper something that turned his ears red. At 11:09, a man in a slate gray suit stepped quietly into the back of the auditorium. Patent Enforcement, East Coast Division. And at 11:10, just as Dalton was bragging about pioneering novel IP, the screen behind him flickered twice and then changed. It wasn't a glitch. It was my name, filed, approved, stamped, public, right there, on the screen, a full-page image of the official U.S. Patent and Trademark Certificate. Patent No. 11/994,672. Title: Adaptive Layered Neural Framework for Multistage Compression. Inventor: Dr. Elise R. Brandt. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. He looked like a man who just tried to rob a house, only to find the owner sitting at the kitchen table, drinking their coffee and holding a shotgun. And I wasn't done yet. By 11:11 a.m., the room had gone dead quiet, the kind of silence that wraps around your ribs and squeezes. Dalton tried to speak, some garbled stutter about miscommunication and collaborative environments, but the screen behind him wasn't letting go. That certificate stared back at him like a tombstone etched with his career. He tapped his clicker. Nothing changed. He glanced offstage. No tech crew moved, because I'd made sure they wouldn't. See, 2 nights earlier, while he was busy presenting my white paper draft to legal for polishing, I was buying time with the AV team. Nothing flashy. Small changes. A preloaded PDF. A hard-coded trigger tied to his presentation laptop's clock. All it took was one extra USB. One board contractor who hated Dalton more than I did. One tiny file labeled Final Presentation Backup V3 Real Final. He'd opened it. Of course he had. The man loved versions of things he didn't understand. At 11:12, the cease and desist landed. Live. On the venue Wi-Fi, no less. Board's inboxes lit up like a Christmas tree on meth. My attorney didn't wait for replies. He CC'd the press. But I wasn't watching the fallout. I was already moving. He didn't even notice me stand. He was still squinting at the certificate, as if staring hard enough might change the name printed in bold beneath the invention. I stepped into the aisle. A few people noticed. One whispered. One gasped. I walked down the center like it was a runway, every step landing like a gavel. All that rage I'd buried under late nights, polite smiles, and quarterly reviews now wrapped around me like armor. He finally saw me when I was 10 feet away. "Elise," he started. I cut him off with a single raised hand. "Don't," I said. Calm. I wanted every syllable to land like a nail in his coffin. "You already gave the world your presentation. Now let me give mine." I turned to the audience. "You were just shown a white paper. What Dalton didn't mention is that the model he presented, while impressive, was not authored by him, nor was it developed under his directive." I held up my phone and tapped the screen. The projector shifted again. This time, the audience saw the receipts. Commit logs, code diffs, Slack messages, date-stamped documents. Side-by-side revisions that showed my name stripped out like rusted bolts. And finally, an email from Dalton, dated 3 weeks ago. Subject line: "Quick favor, need to scrub Elise's name before we circulate this upstairs." The silence snapped in half. Someone in the back said, "Holy shit." And Dalton looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 minutes. But that was just the prelude. Because what he didn't know, what no one in that room knew yet, was that I hadn't come to expose him. I'd come to replace him. The boardroom they shuffled us into smelled like money and nervous sweat. Mahogany table, water bottles lined up like soldiers. Half the suits in that room had been blind cheerleaders for Dalton an hour ago. Now they wouldn't meet his eyes. He was pacing, shoulders hunched, tie loosened like a noose trying to escape. I sat, straight-backed, hands folded, quiet, because I knew what they were about to learn. When you rip the leash off the quiet one, she doesn't bark, she bites. "Let's all just breathe," said Meredith Cho, chief legal. Voice had the brittle calm of someone trying to uncrack an egg. "We're in uncharted waters. But if this can be resolved internally, it can't," I said. Dalton spun toward me. "Elise, come on, this is overreaction. We were collaborators. You were part of my team, I wasn't part of anything," I snapped, louder than I meant to. The air froze. "You carved my name out of my own work like it was a typo. You handed it to Defense Tech Global wrapped in your cologne and lies." His mouth opened, then closed. A flicker of panic leaked through the cracks. "You told them it was your design, didn't you?" I asked, staring through him. "You sold the contract already." No one answered. They didn't have to. Dalton didn't just present my model. He'd sold it. Inked a licensing agreement, 6 figures up front, more on delivery. And the moment my patent hit the airwaves, that agreement became radioactive. "I'll forfeit the royalties," he said too quickly. "Split IP. Hell, we can list you as co-inventor. Just delete the claim." "Elise, be reasonable. You think this is about money?" I laughed, short and sharp. "Dalton, if I wanted cash, I wouldn't have filed under my own name. I'd have auctioned the whole thing to your competitors with a bow on it." A few of the board members shifted. One scribbled something. I locked eyes with Meredith. "He lied to your faces. He signed legal documents under false authorship. That's fraud. If you try to bury this, you're all complicit." Dalton's voice cracked. "You're blowing up everything. Elise, do you have any idea what you're doing?" I stood. Slowly, "I do," I said. "I'm applying for your job." He laughed too loud. "You're joking." Meredith didn't laugh, neither did the CTO. They just stared, because I wasn't bluffing. I'd already filed a formal complaint with HR. I'd submitted my full architecture revisions with annotations. I'd attached a confidential memo detailing every time Dalton had overridden, delayed, or sabotaged progress in favor of his vision. I reached into my bag and slid a folder across the table. "Proposal," I said. "Give me 6 months. I'll rebuild this department from the ground up. I'll get you contracts without lawsuits, and I'll do it without treating your engineers like ghosts." No one spoke. Then Meredith whispered, "Jesus Christ." Dalton looked like he might throw up. But the twist, the real one, I hadn't even opened the second envelope yet. The one marked insurance only open if cornered. I had no intention of backing off, but I wanted him to try. I got the text at 3:17 a.m., blocked number, no signature. Just 6 words, "You shouldn't have pushed this far." I didn't reply. Didn't have to. Because if Dalton thought he could scare me back into the shadows, forgotten who built the shadows in the first place. See, he didn't know what I'd done while he was out doing his TED talks and sipping $18 cocktails with defense contractors. He didn't know about the backup drive in a safety deposit box across town, or the 3 sealed envelopes sitting in 3 different hands, each with a timed release set of documents and access logs, ready to go public if anything happened to me. But the part that really terrified him, I had nothing left to lose. He'd already tried to erase me. What's one more thread in the dark? By sunrise, I was sitting in a booth at Orson's Diner, across from someone who hadn't worn a suit since the crash of 08, but still made VCs flinch when his name hit a thread. "Dalton's spiraling," I told him, pushing a flash drive across the sticky table. "This is what he doesn't want the board to see. He's been cooking his productivity metrics, fudging benchmark reports, ghostwriting testimonials from defense analysts who don't exist." The man took a sip of coffee and smirked. "You're not just playing offense. You're firebombing the field." "I don't want to burn it all," I said. "I want him off the map." "You'll need allies," he said, "and something explosive." I slid him the second folder. The one Dalton never thought I'd touch. It was an NDA, signed by Dalton. Buried doc from 3 years ago, attached to a research trial that never made it past ethics review, because it was dirty. Because it involved synthetic recall induction in trauma patients. Because it killed someone. That project disappeared, or so Dalton thought. He scrubbed the name, repackaged it, changed a few parameters, and sold it as a therapeutic diagnostic. He'd slapped a bow on a corpse and called it innovation. And I had proof. "I need this in the right hands," I said, "not just to expose him. I want it to destroy any chance of a comeback. No TV spin, no podcast redemption arc. Nothing." He nodded slowly. "You're not just replacing him," he said. "You're erasing him." I smiled. But it didn't reach my eyes. "No," I said. "I'm just making sure the credits roll before he rewrites the ending." And outside, somewhere in the city, Dalton still thought this was just about a white paper. He still hadn't realized what I'd patented wasn't just tech. It was leverage. And I was done being subtle. The press got the story before lunch. Not the patent. Not yet. That would have been too clean. What hit first was a leak. A whistleblower tip alleging falsified reports on a now-canceled neural testing project that violated multiple federal standards. The name Dalton Cross appeared twice. Once in the internal memo, once in a subject line marked urgent, stop deployment. And just like that, the story wasn't about IP anymore. It was about ethics, about liability, about whether this company had blood in its circuitry. Dalton's silence was the loudest sound online. He didn't issue a statement, didn't hold a presser. He just vanished. PR scrambled, tried to stall the narrative. But Reddit had already found the archived forum posts, testimonials from fake profiles, the recycled diagrams used in 3 separate grant proposals. And every time they traced something back, there I was, buried in footnotes or redacted completely. His pattern had fingerprints. Mine had timestamps. But the real chaos started the moment his mother called me. Yeah, she left a voicemail. Hi Elise, I don't know what's going on, but Dalton hasn't slept in 2 days and keeps asking about a folder. He thinks you're bluffing. I told him not to reach out, but please, whatever this is, don't ruin him. He's still my son. I replayed it 3 times, not because I needed to hear her beg, but because that one sentence told me everything. He thinks you're bluffing. Good, let him. Because while the company held emergency board meetings and Dalton tried to scrub every digital fingerprint, I was already 3 moves ahead. That night, I attended a closed-door dinner hosted by a government tech procurement officer. Name withheld. NDA signed at the door. Wine too expensive to drink. They didn't ask questions, just nodded as I placed the revised model on the table. Stripped of corporate branding, clean, tested, and now patented in full under my name. Dalton was a mouthpiece, I said plainly. I was the engineer. You want performance, you work with me directly. No middleman. No risk. Didn't flinch. Someone passed me a card, 3 letters, 1 contract. That's when I realized this wasn't just revenge. This was transfer of power. I walked out of that restaurant and watched my breath fog in the cold. Somewhere out there, Dalton was probably pacing his penthouse, calling in favors, shredding documents that were already backed up across 3 clouds. I could almost hear him screaming into a phone, demanding to know who turned on him. Hadn't figured it out yet. It wasn't someone, it was everyone. The first time I saw Dalton after everything broke, he looked like someone wearing his own skin wrong. Unshaven, no tie, eyes bloodshot like the truth had been waterboarding him for days. It was in the elevator of all places, because of course it was. Same steel coffin where he used to smirk at me like I was just a flesh extension of his ambition. Now he wouldn't meet my eyes. He cleared his throat. Lise, we need to talk. I didn't answer. Just stared at the floor numbers tick by. You went nuclear, he said, trying to laugh like we were colleagues in some slapstick office tragedy. You ambushed me. You could have come to me first. Like you came to me when you scrubbed my name off the white paper, I asked. His jaw flexed. It was politics. Optics. You were disposable, I said, stepping in. You're right. That's what you thought. But here's the thing, Dalton. Don't get to cry sabotage when the grenade goes off after you pulled the pin. He leaned in, voice low and sour. They're going to tear you down, you know that? These people love a phoenix story, but they love burning one even more. You're not built for this kind of attention. I smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made people reconsider reality. I'm not here to survive the fire, I whispered. I am the fire. The elevator chimed. I stepped out. He didn't follow. By the end of that week, the board suspended him pending investigation, which was code for we don't want to be near you when the subpoenas land. They stripped his access, canceled his badge. HR leaked the exit quietly, buried between news of a quarterly earnings dip and a canned diversity initiative. But Dalton wasn't done. No, he always fancied himself the phoenix. What if he crawled into enough podcasts and sobbed just right about intellectual misunderstandings and a brilliant woman I failed to uplift, he could emerge as a fallen hero. So he went to the press. Not just the tech blogs, national outlets, glossy cover stories, teary-eyed rebrand videos, a documentary pitch. One headline literally said, "The man who gave her wings." I nearly choked on my coffee. He wasn't just rewriting history. He was selling it. Here's where things got fun. Because while he was on his redemption tour, spinning half-truths and desperate nostalgia, I was already working with compliance. You see, the ethics board never closed the file on the synthetic recall program. They just never had enough evidence to reopen it. Until now. Until I sent them a file labeled Patient X, Session 14 Raw Audio. I never intended for the public to hear it, but the leak came anyway. Dalton's voice, coaching a subject to relive trauma, promising calibrated healing, ignoring flagged brain activity. The recording cut off mid-scream. It spread like wildfire. His podcast deals evaporated. His redemption arc snapped in half like wet wood. Suddenly, no one cared about the white paper anymore. They were asking bigger questions now, criminal ones. They found him 3 days later in a rental car, parked outside a shuttered WeWork in Jersey City. Not dead. Get excited? Just half-conscious, dehydrated, and hugging a laptop like it could still love him back. The headlines were merciless, from visionary to liability. Neural pioneer implodes under ethics scandal. Dalton Cross, a case study in tech arrogance. I didn't gloat, not publicly. No petty tweets, no subtweets, no champagne-soaked Instagram captions, because this wasn't about fireworks. It was about fallout. And mine was still spreading. The company offered me a buyout first. 7 figures. Clean exit, gold-plated apology. The whole let's move on dance. I declined. Then came the counteroffer. Not from the company, from the Pentagon. See, while Dalton was selling vapor and lies, I was refining the compression model, turning what used to be academic into applied war tech. They wanted in. Exclusive rights, joint lab, dual-use clearance. I had one condition, full autonomy. My team, my terms. A clause stating Dalton Cross was permanently blacklisted from every tier of the project. They agreed in under 20 minutes. But before I signed, I had one last thing to do. The PTA meeting. You heard me right. Dalton's younger sister, sweet, naive Melanie, had married into a very old-money suburb in Connecticut. She ran the local school board. Still believed Dalton was misunderstood. Thought I was bitter and milking the media. She posted about it. Often. I showed up, uninvited. I waited until she started her little speech on STEM mentorship for girls. Then I raised my hand, introduced myself, and asked one question. Would you still consider your brother a role model if you knew he signed off on unlicensed trauma manipulation trials that caused 2 neural deaths and 1 permanent vegetative state? The room went silent. Melanie froze, blinked, tried to laugh. I don't think that's appropriate. Pulled a printed transcript from my folder. Dropped it on the table. Page 4, line 38. That's his voice instructing the subject to override pain response thresholds. You're welcome to play the audio for the room. Gasps. One woman crossed herself. Melanie just crumbled. No words, just wet eyes and silence. I left before anyone else could speak. Because sometimes closure isn't a conversation. It's a spotlight. And sometimes revenge isn't fire. It's factual, cold, undeniable, eternal. The contract was signed in a silent, windowless room with biometric locks and 0 small talk. Just 4 people, 2 pens, 1 document that would reshape everything. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The signature was enough. Mine, not Dalton's. Mine, in blue ink, right next to the words Lead Architect, Neural Defense Systems Division. That title used to be his wet dream. Now it was just an echo in my inbox. I walked out into a foggy November morning, the kind that makes everything feel like a scene from a movie you don't quite remember watching. The city moved around me, unaware, uncaring, and I liked it that way. No more handshakes, no more networking brunches, no more men calling me kiddo while stealing credit with the grace of a raccoon in a trash can, just silence and forward motion. Dalton, last I heard, he was living off the grid, some startup in Iceland funded by crypto bros who hadn't yet Googled his name. He sends out monthly newsletters now, neurophilosophy essays full of AI buzzwords and redemptive nonsense. Nobody reads them. He tried contacting me once. Email subject line, "Can we talk?" I didn't open it. Instead, I printed it, framed it, hung it in my new office, right below the patent, right beside the award from the defense secretary. And under that, a sticky note, my own handwriting. Just 2 words, not yours, because that's what this was about, always. Not revenge, not even justice. Just reclamation of voice, of value, of name. He built a kingdom of mirrors and called it legacy. I shattered it, then built something real out of the pieces. And now, when they talk about innovation in the neural space, they don't mention him. They say my name, clearly, loudly, and with respect. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.